The shot that saved 3 units, I can still hear the silence before it happened, that particular kind of quiet that settles over a battlefield when everyone knows death is holding its breath. It was December of 1944, somewhere in the Ardennes Forest, and the cold wasn't just in the air. It was in our bones, in our rifles, in the way we looked at each other without really seeing anymore. My commander, Lieutenant Hartley, was a good man. The kind who followed orders, because that's what kept the machine running, what kept us alive. But that morning, hunched in our frozen foxholes, with the fog thick as cotton and the German lines somewhere in those skeletal trees ahead, I knew his orders were going to get us killed. We'd been holding this position for 6 days. 3 units scattered along a ridge that wasn't on any map that mattered. Protecting a supply route, the brass insisted, was vital. The Germans knew we were there. We knew they knew. It was just a question of who would move first, and how many of us would still be breathing when the moving stopped. I was 22 years old, and I'd already learned that war doesn't care about protocol. It doesn't care about chain of command or proper procedure. War cares about seconds, the difference between squeezing a trigger and having someone squeeze theirs first. Through my scope that morning, I saw him, a German officer, maybe 150 yards out, moving through the trees with 2 radiomen flanking him. I watched him raise his binoculars, watched him scan our line, watched him lower them and turn to speak into the radio. I didn't need to hear the words to know what he was saying. He was calling in our position. Artillery, probably, maybe mortar. Either way, in 10 minutes, maybe 15, this ridge would become a graveyard. I keyed my radio twice. Hartley's voice crackled back, thin and distant. "Hold your fire. We don't compromise position unless engaged." My finger rested on the trigger guard. Not on the trigger, not yet. The German officer was still talking. One of the radio men was writing something down. Coordinates, I thought. Our coordinates. I could see 40, maybe 50 men in our positions, scattered in foxholes and behind fallen logs. Their breath rising in small clouds that gave away every hiding spot. "Lieutenant," I whispered into the radio, "they're calling fire on us. 3 units exposed. I have the shot. Negative, hold position." "That's an order, Corporal." The weight of the rifle against my shoulder felt heavier than it should have. I'd been trained to follow orders. Trained that the moment you start making your own decisions, the whole thing falls apart. But I'd also been trained to recognize when following orders meant dying for no reason at all. The German officer lowered his radio and pointed directly at our position. The radio man nodded. They'd confirmed the coordinates. Somewhere behind their lines, an artillery crew was probably already loading shells, adjusting angles, preparing to turn our small piece of frozen hell into something much worse. I thought about the men around me. Jenkins, barely 19, who talked about his girl back in Ohio every night until we told him to shut up. Martinez, who shared his last cigarette with me 2 days ago when mine had gotten soaked through. Thompson, whose hands shook so badly from the cold that we had to help him hold his mess tin at breakfast. They were all going to die because of a decision made by someone who wasn't here, who couldn't see what I could see through my scope at that moment. My finger moved to the trigger. "I have the shot," I said again, but I wasn't asking anymore. Hartley's voice came back sharp. "Corporal, do not engage. Do you hear me? Stand down." The crosshairs settled on the German officer's chest. I could see the frost on his coat collar, the way his breath clouded in front of his face. He was somebody's son too. Maybe somebody's father. The scope made him close enough that I could imagine the life I was about to end, the memories he carried. The people waiting for him somewhere beyond these trees. But he wasn't going to stop, and we were going to die. I squeezed the trigger. The rifle kicked against my shoulder. Through the scope, I watched the officer's chest bloom red, watched him stagger backward into the snow. The radio man dove for cover, but I'd already moved to the second target, then the third. 3 shots, 3 seconds, then silence again, different this time, heavier. The radio exploded with Hartley's voice, but I'd already switched it off. I knew what happened next. Court-martial, maybe. Insubordination at minimum. But the German artillery never came. The shells that would have torn through our positions remained unfired. Jenkins went home to his girl in Ohio. Martinez made it to Berlin. Thompson's hands eventually stopped shaking. They called it unauthorized, said I'd violated direct orders, compromised the mission, acted outside my authority. Hartley was furious, not because I'd taken the shot, I think, but because I'd made the decision he couldn't make himself. Because I'd proven that sometimes the rules we follow are written by people too far from the dying to understand what's actually at stake. I never fired my weapon again during the war. Didn't need to. We held that ridge until the push forward, and by then the Germans were pulling back across the board. 3 months later, I was standing in formation when they pinned a medal on my chest, some bronze thing that felt lighter than it should have. Hartley was there. He saluted me like I was someone else, someone who'd earned honor through courage rather than desperation. But I know the truth. I didn't save 3 units that day through bravery or tactical genius. I saved them by choosing to live with the weight of one decision rather than the ghosts of 50 men who'd have died if I defollowed orders. That German officer still visits me sometimes in the quiet hours before dawn. I see him through the scope, see the frost on his collar, see the moment before the bullet finds him. They tell you in war that following orders is what makes you a soldier. But no one tells you about the times when being a soldier means choosing which orders to break, and spending the rest of your life wondering if you made the right choice. I saved 3 units that day, but I've never been sure if that shot saved me or if I've been dying from it ever since, just slower than artillery would have allowed. Some silences never end. They just echo differently.